Welcome back to the county seat. We're having our extended conversation today about forest fire management here in the state of Utah. Joining us for our conversation, Darren McAvoy from the Utah State University Extension Service, and we have Doug Heaton, Commissioner from Kane County, Utah, and David Whittekiend, the Forest Supervisor for Uintah Wasatch Cache National Forest. To tell you what, that lower graphic on the TV show goes all the way across the screen.
It's a big name.
It's a big forest.
Yes, it is.
We were talking about fuel loads, and we were talking about how much of it could be harvested and couldn't be harvested. Any other comments that you'd like to take on that?
I do, and well, with indirectly. My only concern would be that the fuel loads that are harvestable should be harvested, and my concern about moving in that direction is, and you mentioned that you couldn't guarantee that we would have ongoing policy that would allow the infrastructure to rebuild. My concern with that is that in order to make that a viable part of the process, it has to be ongoing. In other words, by saying, well, we're not sure whether our policy is going to be ongoing. I mean, we'll try and get a few more for you to log, but we can't guarantee that you'll have future. Does guarantee that there will not be infrastructure investment. That's an absolute guarantee. If you want to have infrastructure which can provide fuel reduction, you have got to give the guarantee. It's an absolute requirement.
Seems like the kind of change that you're talking about would be required to come from Congress, not from the Forest Service the way it's set up today. Is that correct, David?
That would be probably a large part of it. I mean, we're limited by the size of the contracts we can give or the years on the contracts, things like that. I think that we want to move forward and manage the forest the way you're talking about. But the environment that we work in also includes litigation, it includes appeals, it includes those kinds of things, and that has to be taken into account as well. And when we get litigated, if we lose a case for whatever reason, that may change the direction we're moving in, that may change that policy, that may reinterpret that law, and those kinds of actions are really outside of our control.
But at the same time, I 100% agree with you, Doug. I've been working with these biomass companies who are interested in maybe putting in a power plant, and they want a 10 or 20-year guarantee for their supply. And we're talking to them about wood, and sure, with the Forest Service, a 10-year probably. Not a guarantee, but a 10-year probably. So they end up turning to solid municipal waste instead, or other streams, feedstock streams, because we can't back up that thing. I agree completely. That's an important part of the game.
This probably is not it's probably a massive diversion from the topic at hand, but if we're going to solve the problem, we have to address this issue. And the issue is that the Forest Service, their primary function is to manage forests, not to appease we have slipped from a republic in which people who had the power, the authority to act, could simply act, to a democracy in which everybody's got to have a say in the equation, and that's really unfortunate. In fact, the founding fathers foresaw this and said, democracies are as short in their lives as they are violent in their deaths, and that's where we're headed with this, because if everybody has to have a say in the decision, if you can't move without somebody litigating your decision, then you're paralyzed. And in order for you to be able to do what you need to do to make the forest a healthy place for the environment and the people and the animals and all of that, which is way doable, you've got to have the freedom to act. I wish we could get there from here. I don't know how you get there from here, but I wish we could.
Well, let's turn our attention for a minute to actual management of fires. What's the process when a fire breaks? You say you catch 98% of them. Mm-hmm. So, I've always been curious. I don't know that the guys are out there in the towers anymore that much.
Some places we still got them.
Okay.
Northwest,
yep.
Certainly.
How's the process for managing a fire? What happens?
Well, let's talk about when a fire escapes control. Okay. Generally, we try to catch a fire within the first 24 hours, and if that doesn't happen, then we assess where we're going. And when a fire, any fire that breaks, we assign an incident commander to that fire. And that's the person who makes the decisions on the ground. They're there and they're making those decisions. And they're trying to balance the fuels that the fire is in, the behavior that the fire is taking, and the resources that may be threatened by that fire and the values of those things.
It
And
almost
that's
sounds like you need a fire psychologist to be there to interpret the...
if fire had feelings, we probably would. But those folks have a tough job in that they're assessing those values at risk, what that fire is doing, and then how to figure out the tactics to actually to suppress that fire. And it could be anything from standing back because of the danger that could be present to, if you've got homes present, assessing whether those are threatened. But the one thing they always have to keep in mind is firefighter safety. That we will not sacrifice.
Well, and that's perfectly understandable. I've heard that I mean, you had a situation in your county where it didn't seem like that guy on the ground had the authority that he needed to have.
We had a situation just a few weeks ago where the fire broke out on a Sunday afternoon. By Sunday evening, the local fire departments had assembled and the county commission was on site. We called the Forest Service managers and we said, we've got a cat here. And we've got 3 Morris cats standing by. We can have 4 cats here within 2 hours. We knew that the evening, the forecast was for calm winds. We knew the humidity was going to come up. We believed that fire, which was at that point somewhere around 700 acres, we knew that fire was going to not make a lot of progress that night. And we said, we'd like to put this cat on the fire and put these other cats on the fire. Let's get a ring around this thing, shut this thing down. The response was, no. And we said, why not? And they said, well, let me talk to your the cat supervisor. They got the guy there who was in charge of cats, and they basically gave him this instruction. You can go 1 blade width wide. You can go 2 inches deep, no more, and only between the subdivision and the fire. That's a huge frustration for me because I'm confident with 4 cats and the night that we had to work, we could have probably stopped that fire that night. But there wasn't the disposition to do so. What started out as, and may have ended up as a $20,000 fire, turned into a $7.5 million fire. That $7.5 million is now being assessed to the state and to the county because they wouldn't have put it out if it hadn't been for the fact that private property was in jeopardy. And I'm not happy about that. I think that if I'm going to have to pay for the fire, I'd like to have some say in how that fire is managed. And I think that we could have put that fire out that first night, or at least contained it to the point where it wouldn't have gotten to where it, now the next day.
So would you have run I mean, if you'd had your way, you'd have run a ring 4 blades wide?
Yeah, or more, all I could get. And what have you got to lose? The resource? You lost that anyway. The next day that fire went to about 5,000 acres. And then, at that point, with the winds doing what they were doing, and it may have been a moot point anyway, but darn it, we weren't able to try. And I think we could have put it out. If we had put a ring around the fire, around just 3 sides of the fire, and it was on flat ground for the most part, if we could have put a ring around 3 sides of that fire and started backfires so that we could actually have, let that fire, I think that fire very likely could have burned out. We are where we are. Okay. But my frustration has been that it takes the Forest Service 24 hours to decide. That's not the time, that's after 24 hours is not the time to make the decision. That decision should be made before the fire begins, unless the whole goal was to reduce the fuel load. But I mean, we were in proximity with 4 subdivisions. We ended up evacuating 4 subdivisions as a direct result of that decision. And I felt like it was a poor decision.
David?
Yeah,
I wasn't there. Your fire.
Yeah, it wasn't your fire. It wasn't David.
Yeah,
we'd have talked David into putting that thing out.
Can't guarantee that either.
Any other comments on this particular portion before we move on to the next topic?
Well, I think what's important in these situations is the county and the Forest Service talking, certainly before the fire starts, and talking about those kinds of scenarios, the things we might be able to do. The other things that I think help us out are with subdivisions that are in the woods, that are in these fuels. They're under constant threat of wildfire, and they need to make sure that they are fire-wise, that they've cleared fuels away from their own ground and taken care of those kinds of things, that the roofs on these cabins that are out in the woods are not shake shingle, that they're metal or something that's fire resistant. And the other thing I think that is important is the counties and the Forest Service and all the land management agencies working together on cooperative or community wildfire protection plans to really assess the areas that we need to go to reduce those fuels cooperatively and together.
There was never anything so bad that something good can't come out of it. I know we had communication with the forest community there on Cedar Mountain, and we told them, we said, you have to understand, that fire crew marked your house either salvageable or not salvageable based on the interface that you got, the fuel loads that were close to your home. You may, I mean, the decision was made in some cases, if it gets here, the house is gone. We're not going to try to protect it. And I think that's an important message for the listening audience, as they understand that the dynamic that the fire's.
All right, we're going to take a commercial break. We'll come back with more of the county seat. This is actually a very good conversation. I'm finding it very enlightening for me. So we will come back after this message from our sponsors, and we'll continue the conversation.